We are here once again, another incredible One Great Work Warrior episode. And this is going to be an important one and one that you're not going to want to miss. Today, we are going to be talking about a very serious question, and that is, what is the great work? I think a lot of people, might ask that. And especially when you first start getting into learning about this and discovering it and really digging into it, you might start asking yourself, because you hear a lot of people talk about it, and that is doing the great work. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to address this and dive into it and really break down what the great work is. I'm here with a lot of incredible people. We got all the usual people here. We got Jerry, we got Chris, we got Brandon, we got Derek, and who am I missing? So I'm missing somebody here. I know I am. Jim. There we go. Sorry about that, Jim. So anyways, let's dive into this. Chris, let's kick it off with you. Let's dive in. What is the great work?
All right. Thanks, Rick. Thanks for being the intro, man. It's good to be here with you guys. It's pretty simple, but what's interesting is I never really heard that term, the one great work, until I came across whatonearthishappening.com with Mark Passio. And now we're all part of this one great work team. And that's kind of why I put out the call for other people that wanted to do this type of work that I love doing, which is, for me, it's all about freedom. Everything's about freedom. I think that's the main aspect to this reality that we're in, is discovering, understanding, feeling freedom. And when we recognize that we're in a world where people are saying freedom isn't free, things are pretty crooked, right? How could something not be what it is? Because we're living in a world where the truth is obscured and occulted and hidden in many ways. And so the average person is just trying to get by. They're just trying to survive. And, I think there's a big difference between being a human that's truly alive and awake and aware, that requires us to have an extra level of responsibility and recognize that not only do our actions affect everybody around us, but everybody around us affects us, and together we all affect reality itself and the outcome of what's going to happen next. And we can also see how the things we've done up to this point have brought about this cause and effect relationship. And these relationships, understanding them, looking at them, and trying to see how we can do them better and improve on them, is our life task. And when we start to key into that, we start to recognize there is work to be done. That's probably why we're here. It certainly feels like that to me, because when you start doing something that's bigger than just yourself, I mean, you do have to take care of yourself, but when you start trying to think about what can I do with myself of purpose, of value, it opens up a whole new layer to life, and you become a whole another realness. I always think of it like Pinocchio becoming a real boy, when you dedicate yourself something that's bigger than just your personal egoistic survival needs. And that's what I see the one great work as, is the biggest work of all. What if we ask ourselves what is most important? That's what it is. So why don't I pass it on to Derek? Derek's muted for some reason.
Muted.
Let me switch it. It was working before.
Hopefully we get him back.
Damn gremlins.
We'll switch it back out for a second here and see if we can figure out what's going on with
them damn tech gremlins, man. Them tech gremlins.
Jim, you ready to jump in? You got something?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, just like you were saying, Chris, I never heard about the great work and that until I discovered Mark Passio. And yeah, just finished watching his presentation about technology and that, and how he gets into the really spreading the message is the most important thing. And so, but what's the message, is about objective morality and natural law. So when I think about it, it's like, in the most recent years, like say the last decade, I started to realize I'm here for a reason. and trying to figure all that out. I think like everyone's here for a reason. And to me, it's like just to once I understood moral relativism and natural law and all that, like I haven't found it that's anything more powerful than that can really make a difference in this world and get, people to live in a much better condition. So, you know, um, a lot of people say like it's impossible to wake up people, like you shouldn't even try and that, but like if you think about Thomas Paine and Common Sense and what that book was able to do, it was able to help wake up the masses. And he was one person. And like that's part of the great work for sure. It's like how do we create like the modern day version of common sense and just keep trying all different ways to make that happen, because that was media back in the day. That was when a lot of more people were beginning to read and all over the world. So that was the technology of the day. Um, but yeah, now there's so much more of an opportunity for us to spread a message around the world. So yeah, I mean, totally, that I'll come at it, from that with, you know, the technological aspect. It's like we want to spread this message. Well, what's the best way to do it, And so, of course, become through literacy, computer literacy, and just learning as much as you can. And that's what I've been up to, and slowly, and I got a long way to go, but I do understand how important that is to for me to learn because it was the a book that sparked the revolution in people's minds to fight against the king that over 200 years ago, but that made such a huge difference in the world. And so, how do we create this revolution in people's minds? Through it's always going to be through a mass spreading technology. And another big one is just I inaction is an action. Doing nothing, once you know all this stuff and you don't do anything, the inaction of that's your action. You like that's shit if you're not doing anything. Like once you realize you gotta do it and overcome the fear is a big one. And like I know overcoming the fear is huge. Like just the fact that I'm sitting here right now, being able to talk and not caring who sees it anymore is a big deal for me. And like I know, like say I stopped drinking 7 years ago or 6 years ago. I started the work before that since like whatever 2012. I started learning meditation and all that. And I do know that like Brandon's going to go more into this inner work, which is so much a great part of the great work is the inner work. That's how I got here. When I started to like say, look at myself and hold myself accountable, like and to find out who I am and got to a point where I could stop drinking and like hiding from and being irresponsible and all that, taking on more responsibility. So I'll let Brandon get into that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jim. And I first heard about this term, the great work, studying the alchemical traditions. And if anyone is not familiar with that, it was about changing base metals or, things like lead into gold. And this was symbolic or an allegory for, changing one's consciousness, healing one's trauma and doing the shadow work. Because three things that was always involved in the tradition of alchemy, was the lab, or the magician's lab, or the alchemical lab, which was symbolic of the self, the mind, the inner journey. And it was always talking about dissolution, dissolving, purification, and transmutation, because the lead or the base metals was our ignorance, our unconscious, our trauma, our emotional, reactions, us not knowing, and all of the unconscious behaviors from negative forms of programming. So the um, um, the hermit or the alchemist was always in the lab purifying, dissolving, mixing, and blending, trying to figure out what works. Well, this was symbolic of doing the inner work, um, breaking down our ego, because to dissolve something means to break down or take it from a solid to a liquid. Then, therefore, if something is being dissolved, it makes it easier to work with. Then, therefore, when it came to purification, because we do have to use a form of filtration, to weed out certain behaviors, to weed out certain forms of negative influence, to weed out bad behaviors or immoral behaviors, and to also weed out emotional attachments from an egoic standpoint. That was all the things that the alchemical tradition would talk about, weeding out certain behaviors, and coming to understand, like, yes, trauma is real and we have all have been traumatized, but you can learn to heal. And then that's when you had the transmutation, part, is even though you may have been wounded, even though you may have been fractured, you know, the human mind has a lot of plasticity to it. So it can bounce back, it can be stretched, it can be remolded. So we needed this form of, transmutation, and have that ego death to be reborn hell again in the realm of the self, in the realm of light, in the realm of knowledge, in the, in the understanding of natural law. So that's where they got the term gold, because gold was always symbolic and representative of the most high, hell, the sun. And lead was always, symbolic of low states of vibration, low states of consciousness, base consciousness, ignorance. So the hermit or the alchemist would spend years and years in his laboratory, hence going deeper and deeper into the self, to understand, to dissolve, to purify, and to transmutate his own inner vision, his own self. And that's really where the great work starts. Keyword is starts, because you have to do the inner work, start the inner work, and dissolve your own worldviews, dissolve, your egoic attachments, and then start to purify and transmute. Because if we don't do that, then we'll always be stuck and reverting back to whatever form of unconscious or subconscious programming. Then, therefore, once we have that true transmutation, that second birth, we can really grasp that philosopher's stone. Because in the alchemical tradition, the highest point was grasping that alchemical that philosopher's stone. And that was basically when you had the masculine and the feminine in the alchemical wedding, merged in this integration, merged in this harmonious, form of being. And some people have symbolically have represented that, with the conscious and the unconscious. Some people have symbolically represented that with the left and right, hemisphere. And I see it as all of the above. You have the masculine force which penetrates, and you have the feminine force, which receives. These two forces exist in all things. So instead of being in a schism, we have to, heal that division. And that's what the alchemical tradition was trying to teach people. So in the grasping of that philosopher's stone, that was when one had truly done the great work, because then they can push that knowledge outwardly and start to educate others. So I'm gonna push it back to Derek, and hopefully his audio is working.
Is Derek there?
Still no
Oh.
audio.
Ah,
Them gremlins, man. Them tech
they are. It
gremlins.
was working perfect.
I was kind of impressed. I looked up, but right before the meeting, I looked up one great work on the internet just to see, if anything would come up. And, you find the One Great Work Network, which is awesome. But actually
That's
on
cool.
Wikipedia, I was kind of surprised. I had a pretty decent description. It says the great work, a term used in Hermeticism and occult traditions, such as Thelema, accomplishing the great work symbolized as the creation of the philosopher's stone, as Brandon just talked about, represents the culmination of the spiritual path, the attainment of enlightenment, and rescue of the human soul from the unconscious forces which bind it. The great work signifies the spiritual path towards self-transcendence in its entirety. This is the process of bringing unconscious complexes into the conscious awareness in order to integrate them back into oneself. Pretty good for
That's cool.
Wikipedia, I gotta
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm
I didn't
surprised.
expect that,
Yeah,
So yeah, it's
surprised.
pretty cool.
Wow.
Let me pass it off to Jerry. Jerry, what do you got to say in regards to the one great work and being a one
Well,
great work warrior?
Yeah.
there's Derek.
He's
Derek is
back.
back.
All
Oh, my bad.
right.
Good. Jerry, you're good, man.
Well, I want to hear what you have to say, brother. I'll pass it to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And sorry, I don't know what the hell. Just unplugged and plugged back in the microphone. Everything was good to go. And yeah, part of the great work is, when you're creating whatever kind of you want to be at the top of your game and always looking to, refine and just stay on top, level up and whatever. But yeah, Brandon, I love what you had to say because Jim as well. It definitely always starts from within. And are we going to be the master builders of our own life from the inside outwards? And, what are we going to be projecting in the reality field in our local environments, our families, our friendships, all that stuff? And building that inner temple takes a lot of work. There's, maintenance involved year after year. Just think about any kind of given building or whatever. And yes, the firm foundations of eternal principles, a la natural law, cosmic law, universal law, a lot of things that have been, not going to get into semantics, but y'all already know already. But the two pillars that are really going to be, the base of everything is that holy matrimony, alchemical wedding, like Brandon said, of the divine feminine, masculine. And over time, sometimes, these pillars can be, leaning to whatever, and we got to just keep our stuff in check and do that inner work all the time. It's a daily operation, like I like to say, and just holding firm on principles and, keeping that balance between the two pillars and holding them upright, right? Because, I brought this subject up, and one great work warriors, and like people might be like, well, what these guys about, like, all this stuff, and like what kind of work is so great about them, or what, like people can make up whatever they want to in their minds if they're not familiar with certain concepts. So I thought that talking about the great work would be, and y'all already kind of confirmed that, oh shit, we should have done that towards the beginning, but it's all good. And the first segment was great. What is a right? Because if we don't know what our rights are, like someone else is going to be taking advantage of our rights, in a sense. Kind of like if we don't have control of our mind, then someone else might be manipulating it. And that is why part of that great work is always founded on the first cosmic law principle of mentalism. So getting your right state of mind all the time, that's key. And just being in this collective consciousness, there's so many influences and all types of scattered or fragmented consciousnesses. And y'all were talking about like different forms of media before, and just like we're subjected to so much stuff since we're as soon as we're born, pretty much. And yeah, like whatever statistics there are in regards to like a child nowadays is subjected to umpteen thousand ads per, I want to say a day now, because things are so ridiculous. But yeah, you know. So Jerry, what's good, brother?
Yeah, pretty fucking ridiculous, these ads. I swear to God, dude. Like, I'm gonna count them one day, but it's up there. But I have to say I love what everybody said, what Brandon said, and I'm just thinking of that. What do you call it? The distilling. Like I just think of myself. I'm constantly distilling with information, like a moral relativist, like his point of view, and I have to consider what he's saying. So I consider that the distillation process. But at the end, like we get the gold, and that makes us better. So uh yeah, I know you wanted me to talk about my time in the military, Chris. I don't know how that fits into this, but yeah, I think what everybody else said are fundamentals, and then maybe we can talk about the output, the reaching others. So yeah, I'll just leave it there for
I
now.
just thought that was such cool alchemy right there of you, you know, kind of going from one extreme to the other. Being like, for my story, I was working at the courthouse when I started listening to Mark Passio's work, and it was so extreme, like I couldn't be there anymore. And that was kind of what I was getting from you when we first started communicating, is like you were still stuck inside of this military and seeing everything going around you and realizing, hey, this isn't me anymore, you know? And you had to take some
Crazy.
steps, right, to get yourself in a different scenario. How do you, I mean, that's a big change, right?
Oh yeah, I feel like you when you were in the courthouse. I mean, I still, because I have like a tattoo with the government. It's essentially a government tattoo. And I got it because I wanted to honor my father and my grandfather because they have the same one. So I said, you know, as a tradition, and since I'm in the military, it's like symbolic. But now I'm like, shit, bro, I have to fucking, you know, deal with this. You know, lesson learned. But I definitely feel better now that I'm out the military. So take that as you wish, man.
Yeah, thanks for
That's
sharing that.
huge. Yeah, that's
I
huge.
think that's the real stuff that people, you know, have to go through, is changing their life in real ways,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
very
Rick,
cool.
you want to pop in next?
Sure. Yeah. You guys all make amazing points, by the way, and stuff that I'm really going to be thinking about. And when I think about the great work, for me, I always think of the part that people probably fear the most and run away from the most, and that is, we've kind of touched on it. That's the inner work, the shadow work. And to me, that's the foundation I think most people are lacking. I think it's something that people fear doing, is really examining themselves, and that was huge for me. And it was a game changer, and it was what I needed to do in order to continue forward. I had to really dig deep and look inside and really address things and get brutally honest and you know, start recognizing and addressing these traumas, whether they were big or small. We all have them, whether, you know, and I'm not saying they're all the same. People have bigger ones, smaller ones, but they're there and they are definitely affecting you whether you realize it or not. They were for me, and you know, kind of playing in the subconscious. And it's something that I check in with constantly. I mean, it's not a one and done. That's another thing I think people don't realize, is that it is work. You are It's like I'm constantly checking in with myself and working on myself and taking time to really get to know myself. And that's a part that I know people fear. I talk to people and they think that they think that everyone else is a problem. None of it's their problem, what's going on. And they think everything is perfect. And but their lives don't reflect that in any way, but that's where they're at. And they just don't want to do that really deep soul searching. And I really do believe that's the foundation. It was for me that really launched everything. And what's crazy is that, you know, people like they see how crazy the world is. They see the things going wrong and they can describe everything that's going on, but they don't realize that, you know, it's us individuals that are creating this reality. It's an echo of what we've created. And so if you haven't done the shadow work, you haven't done the hard work on yourself and started gaining the knowledge of even knowing simple things of what a right is. There's people that can't even answer that question. And then if you don't know objective morality, you don't know principles, of course what's gonna manifest. If you're not, those aren't your guides and that's not your anchor, you're gonna get what we're creating right now, what we're seeing right now, which to me is just it's crazy chaos and that people are everywhere. And so I think it's so important to do that work. And then once you do that work, then it doesn't end there. It's a constant work. For me, the big side was the tech side. A couple years ago, I was saying before we recorded, I had a cell phone. That was it. I had nothing, and I knew nothing about a computer. I had I didn't even have a computer to be honest. That was a big learning curve for me that I was scared of. I really feared tech because I was so out of sync with it. I had my phone. That was it. But people were telling me if I want to start doing a podcast, I got to learn OBS and I got to get cameras and it was overwhelming. But slowly I chipped away at it. I started, learning. That's where you have to start. You have to you got to put a foot forward and just start going. And so, believe it or not, it's not as hard as you think. There's a lot of learning involved and there's a lot of things that are overwhelming at times, but it's doable. And I'm an example of that because I truly did fear tech. It was something that I dreaded. I didn't think I could do it. And so I think that's so important. I think people need to really, when I think of the great work, I really think people need to do the work on themselves. I think that is what people are missing, as I said before. And once you start learning this and start really getting it, I think it's your responsibility to put it out there to people in whatever form you want. It doesn't have to be a podcast or a show or anything. There's music, there's dance, poetry, art. There's so many different ways. So I just think that that's what the great work is for me.
Great points, Rick. Because before I move on to my second point, I forgot to mention that the alchemists always talked about how the great work was a very hard, laborious thing because it was a lifelong journey. And the symbolic allegory of turning base metals or lead into gold, it was always used like a constant persistent pressure, because pressure is the force which causes change. So you can imagine if you had some lead and just constantly just rubbing, putting pressure, and many decades later it would eventually turn for into gold. Well, that was symbolic of the laborious task, because it is hard, trying to help fix yourself. And then too, the amount of care that was required, the amount of willpower, the amount of dedication and sacrifice, being in the lab, going within yourself requires sacrifice. It required all of these key elements, that we have talked about. Because it wasn't like how, like Rick said, it wasn't like you do it once. No, you was always going back to the lab. You was always going back hell to the drawing board. Because there's always going to be things that will pop up. There's always going to be new information that'll pop in, and then you're always going to learn like, hey, maybe there's something about me that needs to be fixed. So you have to have the tools in order to do the job, and that's what the alchemists always made clear. And that's why I try to make clear to people, like, honestly, doing this kind of work, it's not easy. It really isn't. And I want to make that clear to people. Doing the shadow work is not easy. It takes time. It ain't like you're just going to do it, overnight. How the alchemist would spend 50 years in his laboratory. And as I said earlier, because it starts off as an internal process, so as you have made that change internally, you start to push it out externally and try to educate others. And that's what the hermit would try to do. That's what the sage would try to do, would put that information out there back for others. And in today's world, we do that with technology, so technology is a huge aspect of doing all aspect of the great work. Because even when taking in information, to truly change yourself, like how, like Mark said in his presentation for Seeds 5, a lot of people take in knowledge through technology. a lot of people will listen to podcasts, will listen to lectures, will watch presentations. So, technology is a a great tool when assisting in doing the great work. And that's how we spread the information back out there, because what good is it if it's just you, who knows all of this stuff? You want to share this love, it's like a child, how when a child has a toy and he loves it so much, he shows that toy to everybody. Like he will take it and show it to everybody. Well, it's the same thing, hell, if you truly love and care for the truth, you truly love and care for the knowledge, you'll share it and put it back out there for everyone. So he'll look at it as the last step in the trivium, as the output, the wisdom stage. You are sharing what you've come to know. You're sharing what you've come to understand with everyone else, and you're putting it back out there in the world for others to learn. And that doesn't mean, that people will take the information, but you are still making it hell available. You're putting it back out there into the all. And that's what, the sage or the hermit, would do. Put it back out there to try to educate, others so they can try to, raise their consciousness, so they can, start doing the shadow work, or, start within the great work, internally. So if people aren't putting the information back out there, then it's kind of like a selfish thing, because who are you to think that you can, hoard all the information? Is that not what the social engineers, like are doing? It's not just good enough to know. What good is knowledge if it's not properly applied? You know, and again, I'm going to say that. What good is knowledge if it's not properly applied? You can know all the things in the universe, but what good is that if you don't apply it in reality? If you don't, put it back out there for others in the form of right action with these hands? And sadly, that's what so many people are not doing. There are a lot of people who are knowledgeable. I've come across them in, like in real life. I've seen them for, like in the comments, but there's still something that's holding them back from putting it back out there for other people to learn, to educate, and to raise their consciousness.
Yeah, you made me think of something, Brandon. Like recently, a couple of friends of mine been talking about like some of the posts that I made, and I asked them, I was like, "Do you like really understand what I'm talking about?" Like, and they do say that they understand it, but then they're like telling me that people aren't ready to hear it, and that's what I think is really part of the great work is even though people aren't ready to hear it, you just keep saying it anyway.
Great point.
And
Yeah.
like, but yeah, it's upsetting, like you're saying, because now some of my friends they do understand it, but they're just gonna say no one wants to hear it and say like that's disappointing that they're not willing to, process it and then start thinking about, spreading the word themselves. And these are people who have been doing inner work. So, but
Yeah.
like maybe, they're not there yet, but I'll just keep saying it and then maybe it'll get through to them or um that's
When people
just
say that, it
their
almost seems
gift.
like an excuse or a cop out, though. It's like, oh, they're not ready to hear it. Well, it's like,
Agreed.
do you have that
Yeah.
fire lit within you to, be like, hey, ready or not, mother lovers, I'm gonna say it whether you're ready for it or not. I'm gonna try to dial it down or try to, put it into some kind of framework that you can understand it. Like if you really truly understand and have integrated the information and apply it, like Brandon is saying, like you apply it through your rhetoric, the art of persuasion, how you craft your words towards certain people. You have to understand your fucking audience and the people that you're around sometimes too. So people that are saying like, oh, I want to say so much, but they're not ready for it. It's like, what? It's 2023. What the fuck you think is going on? Like it's been past yesteryear that, like everyone should have been raising their fucking voice at whatever level they're at and be humble with it, and like understand that people aren't going to get it right away. Don't be so like take it as a grain of sand or salt, every interaction you have, like on a daily basis. I see people at work. I try to like integrate little things of just like encouragement, empowerment, and stuff. It doesn't have to be this fucking red pilling people all the fucking time. Like, you don't have to fucking, have that approach with people. There's other ways that people are going to resonate with certain aspects of the truth or the great work or hermetic principles. And then you can get into how government is fucking slavery and how we're not the sovereign beings that we really should be, and how, how things have been inverted, perverted, and yada yada. But yeah, Chris, what's good, man? We haven't heard much of you tonight, so yeah. I love what you said about that Pinocchio stuff real quick, because like, it's really about activating yourself, the real AI, an activated individual, the activated anima within oneself being animated, right? Because Pinocchio wasn't animated before, whatever happened. Like, so yeah, I like that.
Oh, that's a perfect lead in for what I want to say. And thanks, Derek, by the way, for bringing up this topic, because it's a great idea. And, I was saying that, yeah, like we should have done this number one, but, Brandon makes a good point too, that before you get to the one great work, you got to do the inner work. Otherwise, you're not going to be much good at this game of the one great work, because you're going to bleed out all your problems onto people or whatever, or it's going to be coming from an egotistical point of view. But Brandon was also talking about kids' toys, and when Derek earlier said the master builder, it got me thinking about that movie, the Lego movie. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but most movies out there I don't recommend watching because they're full of propaganda and some bunch of bullshit. But the Lego movie has a good moral in it, and I came up with this word in some of my reading called somnambulistic. And what that is like sleepwalking. It's like living life, but you're not actually awake and aware. And I think what's really interesting thing about that Lego movie is it's like the head character, he's kind of this dumbass, and he's kind of bungling his way through, what am I supposed to do? And, like the wise guy saying, like, you got to actually think of something that nobody thought of before. They're actually telling him he has to use creativity, and that's what he has to do. He has to learn how to use the Legos, like make a circle into a wheel, and that saves their life or whatever. It's just like using a little bit of imagination and creativity to kind of think around the problem. Every time I bring up these issues with people, like they get it on a certain level, like the taxes is stealing, like they're like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but because they can't see from here to the finish line, and it seems like scary or unrealistic to go from where we're at now to a world where we're all self-responsible, then it can't happen because I can't imagine it. Therefore, well, let's just go with the shitty program we got now of cheating and stealing and raping one another, But the back to the Lego movie, the point I really want to make about that, and it's the same point I made in my presentation, is imagination, having the ability to create and imagine. It has a lot to do with creation itself. And like people that are somnambulistic, that are asleep, they must not get that there's a God, that there is a master builder, that there is intelligence, mentalism, like you talked about. The universe is intelligent. And this is an amazing, fantastic, mind-blowing experience we're having here, that we get an opportunity to live and be part of this amazing experience of creation. And how real is that? And how amazing is that? Why the fuck would you sleep through that? There's work to be done. And that's if you're tuned in, and if you've done the work enough to where your brain's not constantly distracted by all the little bullshit in Lego world, and you can actually focus for long enough to listen to the voice inside of you, it's going to tell you, do something good, do something that shows you care, and true care is always going to be a level of hard work or frustration or pain, but it doesn't have to be suffering, because we're not choosing just to, like we talked about before, just to go through all the terrible bad things, just to go through the terrible bad things. We're going through difficulties and struggles so that at the end of the road, we can make things better for all, everyone concerned, the great all. And to me, that even in that Lego movie at the end, he got everybody to link their hands and make a bridge so they all work together, right? But without him having that ingenuity and inspiration, then everybody else just didn't do shit. They were just sleeping. They were just in the material world. There's nothing more to it. And so a lot of this is recognizing that the world we're in is amazing and there is a great spirit, and that when you awaken to that, then you feel the joy of caring about that, and then you can receive the messages and directions of what should I do with myself. You know, that takes initiative, which is, you know, the master builder. It's creativity, it's thinking, you know, working through those frustrations.
Right. You had brought up the imagination, and who has some of the biggest, brightest imagination? Children. So a part of the great work is educating and teaching children these concepts of how natural law, freedom, rights, free will choice, and of course, the spiritual, essence that we all, possess. And I highly encourage, everyone to check out Enoch Martin's work and Will Keller. This is something that Will Keller always talks about, is educating the next generation. So if you have kids, or if you work around kids, if you work around the youth, if you work around the next generation, we have a moral obligation to teach them these same concepts. Because think about it, in 10 to 15 years, they're going to be grown up and they're going to be adults, and then they're going to be turning freaking to parents. So we want to make sure that this knowledge stays present within them. This is the passing of the lamp that I talked about in my presentation. We are keeping that fire alive by educating them and installing the correct form of mind influence within them, so that they aren't going down this terrible path, that they aren't making these same mistakes. And I like that, like this is being brought up more in the natural law, community. It was something that was talked about in Funnel 3, and, something that was talked about in the recent, Seed 5, which everyone needs to check out videos to both conferences. But yeah, in morally educating, the youth, and not just turning a blind eye to it, because sadly, we as adults have failed the next generation. We have failed the youth, this is something that also that how Cat Waters talks about, in the whole destructive family dynamic. It is how families are failing their children. They're not teaching these moral concepts. We're actually installing more and more trauma. We're installing more and more negative forms of programming. We are teaching them to worship the state. We're teaching them to bow down to authority. Recently today, I was calling a game and I heard a woman say her son joined the Air Force, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, oh my gosh, that means you're a bad parent. Because I'm sorry, whenever I hear someone saying that like their child is joining the military, I want to say, man, you are a bad parent. Like, I'm sorry, because we're not teaching these, we're not installing these moral principles within the next generation, and then they're growing up and they're making the same fucking mistakes that their parents have made, that their grandparents have made. And that's how we continue to perpetuate this wheel of suffering, by not morally educating the youth. But you know who is educating the youth? The state,
And fucking Disney.
yeah, and all these
Yep.
corporations, they are installing, Jerry called it ads earlier. I like to call it aids. They're installing these aids, these ads, in the youth's mind, and literally polluting them. They're being polluted with hypersexualization. Obeying authority, not teaching any form of principles, integrity, nothing about truth, nothing about honor, nothing about honesty, nothing about consciousness, and of course, nothing about spirituality, and of course, nothing about objective morality. Because of course, the state and authority, they all want these concepts to not be present, so therefore they can install their negative programming. So we have a moral obligation as adults to install the correct principles within the youth. And if you have kids, you should be, introducing these topics of natural law, freedom, what is not the right, what coercion means, why the state is immoral, and these spiritual concepts. And you can even start getting into, some light occult teachings, because believe it or not, kids can understand a lot more than we give them credit for. And then two, as you are working, these concepts in, you can learn from these kids, you can learn from the youth, because there is a lot to be gained. And then two, it even creates a deeper bond, hell, with this next generation, because there is a huge disconnect. Well, how do we bridge that gap? We have to start when they are young, man. And I've always said, from as soon as that child is birthed, then that's when you should be start installing these forms of positive programming. And that's why you need to understand these concepts of psychology. You can use the same techniques of mind control for mind influence in a positive way. You can use subliminal messages for in a positive way. How you can have something just playing for in the background, get it installed for in their subconscious over and over and over. Use repetition, use symbols, use colors, use frequency. Create an environment based on freedom. Create an environment based on natural law. Hell, I wouldn't care if you had a whole bedroom set up and you just had natural law written all over the walls. Get that shit programmed into your child's mind. Get that shit programmed into your child's mind. Get that shit programmed into your child's subconscious, because and for years, that's all the child has is the subconscious mind. So why are we not taking advantage of it? Because the state is, these corporations are,
Exactly.
how Google is, how Disney is, how the Vatican is. So why are we not using these same tools for mind influence? We are actually missing on a great opportunity here. Because if we truly cared and we truly morally educated the next generation, then we can actually start to see some fucking results. But sadly, most people are doing what? Putting their child in front of a tablet, putting their child in front of a television, sending their kid to these state indoctrinated slave camps, installing these, how these same traumatic forms of programming, pushing these hypersexualization hell upon the youth. We are literally failing the youth, man. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. So yeah, if people want to dive deeper, I highly encourage them. Check out Will Keller's work. He talks about this in almost every presentation. And check out Inaka Martin's work, because she put out a wonderful book that can be brought about it, teaching the 7 hermetic principles in a very, very simple and easy way that even a child can understand. And I have the book. So, I highly encourage, everyone, if you have children, to check out the book.
Give to nature and nature will give to you.
Give that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Brandon, real quick. I just want to say, just 2 seconds. There's also a great couple, Loveolution. They're raising their kid. He's like 5 years old. He was watching the Funnel conference, which is, Funnel is an acronym, for those that don't know, Freedom Under Natural Law. And there was a great conference this past June, as well as the Seed 5, Metamorphosis, dozens of speakers. But and like Brandon, what you said is so important. I wanted to say this real quick, is that, all right, so there's a lot of parents out there, kind of like Jim, what you were saying, is like, oh, people aren't ready and this and that. Oh, the kid is too young and he's not ready to hear this and that. And the same with how some parents kind of introduce foods to kids and this and that. And I've friends in France like, hey, my 2-year-old kid eats what I eat, pretty much. It's like, no problem with that, whatever. And like, so why not take the informational food, the soul food, and do the same thing? Like, why subject them to the this like Peppa Pig, this dumbass fucking like mediocre like shit that people have their kids, just like parents want to have their time. And so yeah, Brandon, like you said, like throw them in front of a tablet and there you go. And it ain't fucking, it's like lukewarm fucking like shit, you know what I mean? It ain't the bee's knees, even though it's in like fucking like every country, whatever. So yeah, like there's the onslaught on your kids through unfortunate, shitty forms of media. What are you going to do about it? I'm not talking to y'all, but it's just like the audience out there. So we have to take it upon ourselves to a good degree, homeschool them if you can. If you can't, then, there's that kind of battle with deprogramming your kid of what they've been subjected to through the public school system and yada, yada. That's kind of all I had to say about that real quick. So yeah, thank you. Whoever was, yeah.
And I think it's important to remember too that we're all examples. Like if you don't have children of your own, you're still in the thought process of other human beings around you and young people. And so everything we do has an impact, just like you throw pebbles into the water. Every single pebble that hits that meniscus of the water is going to send out rings of reverberations and affect everything around you. So that's where that inner work comes in so important. And is like we have to keep analyzing and reanalyzing ourselves and peeling off our old skin and rebirthing ourselves into a new better version of ourselves. And there's no point at which we just reach enlightenment and we got it right. If you reach enlightenment in this world right now, it's realizing this shit's fucked up, which means that there's a lot of work to do. You don't got it until all humans are free and not stealing from one another. So we got a lot of work to do. And I think personally, taking the initiative is like one of the biggest takeaways I hope people take away from what I'm trying to present is that, like in that story of talk about child that I was describing in the Lego movie, the dad is like trying to build a whole city out of Lego blocks and he wants to structure everything. And he's so involved in the materialistic world, which is where most parents are at. Like, I need to make enough money so my kid could go to a good school and I could get him a good car or whatever. It's like super material based point of view on everything. And then sacrificing morals and principles because it just doesn't tie in with the reality right now. And so that really requires to make this shift and to become a real boy is to recognize that poor little kid's imagination was getting destroyed in that process. And until the father had the sense to stop, caring more about his work and, these buildings and notice that his child, they only have so much time when their imagination is open and they're learning. That's the time where you need to be for them, there for them and care with them and play with them and help them grow their imagination. And so I think we all do that in a billion ways in everything we do and the examples we set forward. So in what ways in your life are you taking the initiative to bring something new into this realm and help people see something they didn't see before? If you're not doing that, then you're going to be coming up short and you're going to feel it in some way or another. It's going to show up in your life. The universe will show you, here's where you're coming up short and you're going to be suffering. All right. What other thoughts we got? Are we getting? Did you get through the? You had a few points to make, Brandon. Do you have one more? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one more. And this is one that gets overlooked even more than the conscious parenting. Um, if you have a certain skill, if you have a certain, or like you may be good at creating, slides, or creating thumbnails, or you may be good at video editing, you can provide a certain service, for individuals who are artists, or for individuals who are involved in the one great work. There are some content creators who are fortunate enough to have a team. They may have a producer. They may have someone who creates slides. They may have someone who does their video editing. That's totally fine because it takes the load off the individual, who is presenting. And all of those team members are involved in the great work because it makes it so much easier because many hands make light work, and if it's just one person trying to handle the load, it makes it so much harder because there's going to be problems that will arise. So if you have a producer, if you have, someone who it's just helping you, with your live stream, then that's totally fine. And we need more of that because, that's us coming together to work to make this message, more widespread. And then also too, you can help donate. how you can help donate, how monetary, um, you know, how monetary currency, or you can donate technology. How you can reach out if you have a lot of technology, and a content creator who may be hell in need, then how you can how you can donate that. These are certain things that the average individual can do to help assist in health of great work, because I mean, hell, let's be honest, you do need a level of understanding of this hardware. And as you progress, you want to step your game up, there is technology that is required. Of course, you got to have a laptop, or have desktop, you got to have a camera, have webcam, lights, have microphone headset, software. And as you progress, you want to, help get better at it. You can, if you start building AL Studio, like all of that shit costs money, and if there are donations, it's a free will exchange. The presenter is giving up their time and their effort to spread, this knowledge. And if anyone wants to donate, then it's an even exchange, because they are giving up their monetary, possessions that they work hard for in a free will acceptance, or they are, giving off a piece of technology in the free will acceptance. So you have that even exchange based on free will. These are things that get, overlooked as far as doing the great work, because honestly, content creation may not be for everybody. Well, if you are one of those individuals, then try reaching out to a content creator. Say, hey, I may be good at organization. How can I help you, in organizing with other people? Or, let's say you may be good at marketing, then you can reach out to a content creator and say, hey, here's my skill. How can I help assist you in getting your message out even further? Because believe it or not, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and we need more people willing to step up to help assist those individuals, and therefore take some of that load off. So that was my last
Yeah.
point that I wanted to make, because in the future, I hope that I can, help produce or help others, have live stream their work. That's something that I'm really going to look into. So, not only will I still be creating content, but I can help, others and assist others in producing and pushing out their content in, even further.
Yeah, in the modern day, like you were talking about before, they had, at one time people were passing around books or flyers. In the modern day, we have the internet, we have media, we got, you can be a master of sound, a master technician of running webinars and all these type of things as a modern day swords and weapons of truth, right? Like, how are you going to get that message out, just out there yelling with a speakerphone compared to what you can do online? So, I like what Rick was saying too. For me, it's been a hell of a battle. I was a carpenter. I didn't like computer stuff. That's what I called it, computer stuff, But I realized, like, in my field of construction and carpentry, if you don't get the tools, then you don't get the job. You know, when they're looking for the guy to frame the wall, they're looking for the guy that has a framing gun. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not that guy, then you know what I mean? So you got to learn how to not only get the tools, learn how to use the tools, and then practice using them until you can do it with some skill and technique, which, it's a learning curve. And, if you've watched my work, you've seen a lot of those mistakes.
Mine too.
But, we're coming along, right?
Yep. It's all about growth. It's all about growth.
Absolutely. And what else is the one great work but growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gary, any last points? Jim? Anybody want to jump in?
I definitely wanted to finish my notes real quick. I mean, yeah, growth and evolution, not devolution or what involution, whatever, right? And how can we get, what Jim was saying in the beginning, like common sense, which is kind of like the breakdown of the etymological term of consciousness. how can we get people more on the proper frequency and wavelength and common sense of higher consciousness, cosmic consciousness? And yeah, it has to start at the individual level, taking it back to the law of correspondence, right? So when we take it from the micro on the individual level, and it's just like influencing little pockets here and there, think of like grassroots movements and this and that, and how things can just, well up in certain areas, and like think about the 100 monkey effect or whatever. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, it's like all about, making your inner content great before the outer content, whatever you're creating in the outer world, is going to be great. Kind of like how that slogan of, oh, like, make America great again, when there's so many people shouting that term that lack greatness within themselves and waiting for a fucking savior or some shit like that. That's not how this shit fucking works. All right. So yeah, it's like, oh, there's so much work going on, like, oh, like, why you gotta be working so hard and shit, like, and it's just a fucking word, work. And like, I don't even take it as like, oh, like an arduous thing, because I've kind of got over that hump of really just doing so much, almost like to a point of like biospiritual regenesis, and like having that cosmic apology, and like recognizing all my faults and all this stuff. And like, people talk about like at the end of their death, like having that flash back of their life and yada yada. I had that like a dozen years ago, and that completely made a fucking frequency shift in my life. And I just like got attuned to natural law kind of naturally, because that's kind of more or less our natural state if shit isn't all fucked up and perverted and inverted, since fucking eons. So yeah, like on a daily basis, I don't see these things as like, oh, it's like work, and like, how, do your chores and this and that. We're programmed as kids, like, like, oh, I gotta do this and this and that. I just thinking like, all right, this is what has to be done, on to the next, because there's always going to be something else. There's no fucking arrival point here. Like, people cannot rest on their fucking laurels in this, pretty dark fucking hour that we're in. There's a lot of fucking, things to be done. I'm not going to say work to be done, because just kidding. So yeah, Brandon, like you said, we're trying to turn that base level lead consciousness into gold. And sometimes, over time, you put things on the shelf and they collect dust, right? We gotta maintain and polish that shit every once in a while, right? So yeah, there's virtue signaling in a lot of camps, including the truth seeking speaking communities, where even words like the great work is a fucking almost like a buzzword, and people give lip service to that. And this is not what this is about. This is real life fucking shit on a daily basis. And we all need to, be humbled every now and then. We all need to hold accountability within ourselves and try to bring forth the best version of ourselves as possible. Having that pure, clear vessel to be an instrument of truth, and just, a stellar fucking personality and someone to look up to, like you're saying, for the youth, right? So there's a lot of things to be considered. Tending the fires within, you got to have that fucking spark first and fucking foremost, which is why sometimes I'd like to speak like this, to kind of light a fire up people's fucking asses, whatever. Sometimes you have to bring that fire, especially if you're a fire sign. And if you're a fire sign like Brandon with the Aries and all that good shit that he carries, and Jerry as well, that rhymes too, hey. Then yeah, there's actually extra inner fucking work to kind of tend to those fires, because they can burn a motherfucker up and people around them. So that's part of the journey I've been on. And just yeah, we have to have that redeemer in the back of our minds as well. If we make mistakes, so that no one is infallible. So we have to understand that, pay respects to the divine feminine, divine masculine, not have so much yang up in your thing, and not be so fucking passive as well. So try to uphold your rights, the truth, with a capital, all caps, and try to spread some kind of joy even throughout the darkness. Be that fucking light. And even one flicker of light, like a candlestick in a room of darkness, yes, the darkness will pay attention to that, because it's the only thing that can be fixated in a realm of darkness. So how are you going to maintain your inner flame? Kind of part of the games.
Beautiful.
Cheers.
Yes, and I love how that reflects too Brandon's work with the fire and the everlasting lamp. And the truth is, this fire is burning inside of everyone, and a lot of people are just, like I'm saying, that somnambulistic state where it's just being covered up. And if you do that, it'll burn you up from the inside. One way or another, you're going to be burning yourself on the inside if you're not transmuting that fire or putting something out there with it. Especially people that have come to recognize the state of things in this world, and they see the evils and they see the bad things. I know everyone who's gone through this learning process of the conspiratorial type work that we wind up having to look into on this journey, it can be damaging to the self if you don't do anything with it. If you just let it bounce around inside of yourself, it's like that. It's like you were saying, it's a fire that's burning, but it's got nowhere to go except burn inside of you. So the key to letting that out is to initiate, your hands, like Brandon says, and do something with them, and get that fire, use that fire as fuel to try to make a difference. Not just try, but do make a difference. So I think we'll end it there, unless one of you brave gentlemen want to jump in one last time.
Just
I think everything was covered.
yeah.
Great talk.
It's
Amazing.
like sharpening a sword, because we hear about the sword help truth, but just like with any blade, with any edge, if you use it a lot, it starts to become dull, and if you ever sharpen any blade, it requires pressure. You have to use pressure, because I've sharpened, how many knives you got to, have it at a certain angle, and pressure is required. Well, if we were not putting pressure on ourselves to do that interchange, then the universe will eventually put pressure on us by the way of Themis. So I would rather choose the first option and not the latter, because regardless of not, inevitably we're all are going to be faced and forced to change. It's just the amount of pressure that's going to be required. Some people are going to require way more pressure than others, but at the end of the day, we're all are going to be forced and faced to change ourselves and come to learn these topics. It's just a matter of how much pressure is going to be required. And sadly, we keep seeing more and more pressure being put on mankind because we refuse to face this change.
Mm-hmm.
The heat is on.
Yeah. Just wanted to say real quick that I was just like Rick and Chris when it came to computers. I wanted nothing to do with it, and I'm still like, you know, working my way through it. But once you know, you know. Like anyone who gets this stuff, once you know, you know. And what a tremendous opportunity it is for us in this day and age to use this technology to counteract those dark forces, like
Yeah.
so that's and if you understand you can be a stand for truth and morality and you don't do anything, like I said earlier, that inaction is an action. So doing nothing is your action. And you'll go to your deathbed with a lot of regret, you know. So that's just the last thing I was gonna say. Just do it.
Do it.
Do
Thanks
it.
for listening, folks. And thanks for coming and joining me for this conversation. Brandon, Rick, Jerry, Derek, Jim, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate your thoughts and presence, and it makes me every time we have these conversations, we all have to think about it, and we're doing that inner work ourselves and looking at our life and wondering, do I got this right? And how do I say it? So it's great work. Let's keep it up.
Yeah. Thank
Thanks,
you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Guys.
Thank you.
Rat trap. Where's the rats at? The cheese is gone, but the trap's flat. Gonna need a new fat cat to lick that milk fat. You know you like those cats, yeah. Why don't you like this crap, cat? How can we take our life back? Tight ties, the boss flies, you got your fucking hands tied. Why's that? Effects are facts. These fat cats got your paycheck in their backpack. These fat cats got your neck up in their razor deck. They flex. And these feeble mice run. They scatter chatter, don't question. Their toes whisper, never action. These fat cats ain't got no job done. Eliminate the problem. No more robbing. Let's toss them, lob them, clubber all of them, every one. It's the average Joe that's hurting. Just steady working. Stay sleeping, don't be peeking behind that curtain. Lose your socks, shock, cause it's certain these cats just brats, couch mooch surfing. They lurking and smirking. These rats run games, they keep it secret. Family name, got no shame, playing dirty drains. Whack jobs insane, wanna own your brain. Guide your thoughts, screenshots and bots. Scooping out your hopes, sideshow cornhole popes. They laughing folks, we're their jokes. They pull those ropes, it's the fucking rat, son. You got a question. Flip flap, movie quack, parent trap, truth smack, tarmac, money back, no facts, smoking cracks, Minecraft, life rack. Gotta get that loot back. Gotta get that loot back. Gotta get that loot back. Rat trap. Where's the rats at? The cheese is gone, but the trap's flat. We're gonna need a new fat cat to lick that milk fat. Tight ties, the boss flies, you got your fucking hands tied. Why's that? Effects are facts. Those fat cats got your paycheck in their backpack. These fat cats got your neck up in their razor deck, they flex. Flip flap, movie quack, parent trap, truth smack, tarmac, money back, no facts, smoking cracks, Minecraft, life rack. Gotta get that loot back. Guide your thoughts, screenshots and bots, scooping out your hopes, sideshow cornhole popes. They're laughing folks, and we're their jokes. They pull these ropes, it's the fucking rat, son. You got a question.